Hello. Okay. It is working. Thank you, Mike. It's about time to get started here this morning. I'm good to see everybody here. Welcome to winter. Fall was very short. What, about 3 days? Are you looking at, I can find you a seat, maybe in the parking lot, but I can find you a seat, sir. Yeah, that would be good for you. Jerry, we're glad you're back. We're more glad Lola's back, but I know you have to be with her, so we're glad you're back. Glad you had a good time. I know that Texas is glad to be rid of you. I mean, it's glad that you're home as well. Hey, as long as I don't have to look at it, I don't care. We are glad that you guys are back from vacation, and also Mr. Waldo's back here. I have to refer to Gene Sneed as Waldo because on Sunday mornings, you send something out and it's always, where's Waldo this morning? You never knew where he was going to be while they were out on vacation. So that's Mr. Waldo Sneed now. But it's good to see everybody here. It's good to, and I don't have, thank goodness, this is one of those good Sunday mornings. I don't have a lot of bad news. So it's a good day. Other than, well, there's some things that are just, you have to give and take. I have to say, I had a good time yesterday. My cousin came up, he and his wife, and went to Colleen, and I went to the football game over at Arkansas. I've been in coaching since 1974, and I have to say literally, now, don't get me wrong. I have been in games where Uncle Bob was the referee, and you just knew what was going to happen, and it did. You knew you weren't going to win. You knew, but that's the first time I've ever seen a college game that was refereed that way. And I mean, every time it was, you just sit there and it's like, am I really? And if you haven't watched it, if you're a football fan, and they have a replay of it somewhere. Go back and watch it and just look at some of the things. There had to be a whole bunch of this going on somewhere. I don't know exactly where, but I know there is in all sports. People can talk about this, but that's what drives it. It's called cash, And think about this. This is disgusting as anything. And I hope that people outside, just school people, but the state of Oklahoma now allows high school kids that you can transfer anywhere, kind of like these college kids. You can just go anywhere. And they're now paying high school kids to play in sports. It's like, are you out of your mind? What are we teaching kids when they can't even pass basic math, but we're paying them to play in athletics or something? That's where the entire state of Oklahoma needs to put a petition together and just fire the OSSAA because they've lost their mind when you start doing that kind of stuff. Also this morning, on a much better note, I want to go ahead and plug Craig next week because he's going to be teaching class and then presenting a lesson to us. And he's going to be looking at what is happening at Hope Harbor, all right? Where it's in the position where they're opening back up. I'll let him explain that. And it's not that we've been hiding things, please. Sometimes I feel like I'm in the dark as much as anybody is on some of this, but there is a plan that is put together. We do have a vision out there that we're focused on achieving. And next week, Craig will, so I encourage you to be here. Now, to kind of kick this off, next Saturday morning, we have the men's breakfast at 8. But also, next Saturday evening, and at 6:30, and this will be here in the auditorium, they're going to show The Sound of Hope, which is the story of Possum Trot. And this is going to be a special showing, and that will be 6:30 here in the auditorium. And this kind of helps set the tone for what Craig will talk about then on Sunday morning. So all people are invited. This is not just for the young people. No, this is for everybody. we want you to know what the church is involved in. And we want this to be open. We want to try to give you as much information. And this is one of the things that will help provide some information about the direction of Hope Harbor. All right? I will just say this now, that in the way that Hope Harbor had been operating, brothers and sisters, it's very difficult to provide the school. So the school was taken out of it, which children will be allowed to go to, public school and so on, in order to try to maintain that, set state standards. What was happening was we were getting students in, and when they caught up with where they were in school, then they went back to that environment. And it was like, is that really a good thing in that regard? So we're changing it. It's going to be more in foster care now, where the children come in. We have parents, and it's going to be a true home situation where they don't go back somewhere else. They're there, and the children can stay together in family setting instead of being separated to the four corners of the state. So I'm not going to say any more because I don't know anymore. So, Craig, I'll leave that with you.
That's most of my thunder right there.
Well, next week you can show them the lightning. That was just the rumble that you hear in the background. All right. We are, like I say, I am thankful that everyone is here this morning. And just real quick, there's some things that I want to look at. I didn't want to got to the end of class last week, and I felt like that when we got there, it was just kind of a rush to the end. But I want to go back and look at the very end of chapter 38 real quick, and then look in Matthew chapter 1. I want to look at this for a moment because I want you, we think about things and we look at things sometimes. Now, let's just talk about this for a moment, because I've talked about this before in class. When we talk about genealogies and so on, who do you always list first? Okay, we start with Adam, but then who's listed after that? Firstborn. Okay, so we look at this and we think that as it comes down, everything is the firstborn son. And then, you start reading through here and it's like, wait a minute, this ain't right. And so when you flip over in Matthew, and at the end of the chapter 38, where it talks about Tamar, and it talks about that she had twins, but Perez was the one that was mentioned. Well, when you go back over then in Matthew and you look at this, both twins are mentioned. Okay? The twins are mentioned, which is kind of unusual because normally you just go with the oldest, which was been the firstborn, and so on. So when we talk about this, there's other things that I think are kind of interesting. When you look at this, in Matthew it says Abraham. What was Abraham's name before? Abram, right? Isaac, Jacob. Wait a minute. Why is it Jacob? Because didn't God change his name to Israel? So why is it Abraham, Isaac, Jacob instead of Abraham, Isaac, Israel? Just one of those things. And we see later on that when we mention this, that it refers to him as Jacob, even though his name was changed. So it's one of those things that's kind of, I don't know. I just noticed that, and you kind of pick up on it. The other thing that would come along with then, and here's a guy that we just talked about, because he, his son-in-law, or his sons, two of them, what happened to them, that God took them, because the first one was he says, just so terribly evil. The second one wouldn't fulfill what he was supposed to do to give his brother offspring, because he was looking at inheritance. And I think that it's interesting. Now then, let's look at this. Was Judah the oldest boy of Jacob? No. In fact, he's number 4 son. Why would the number 4 son get this And especially after what he just did. But then you go back to chapter 37, where they throw Joseph in the pit. And who's the guy that speaks up and says, no, we ain't killing the boy. We're not putting this blood on our hands. Now, Reuben had the idea that he was going to sneak around, come back and get him. But Judah was the brother that said, no, we're not going to. And it says that his brothers listened to him. So, you got 10 boys right here. One down in the hole. The other one hadn't been born yet. And they listened to Judah. So, is Judah got a little pull right here from somewhere that seems like that maybe... And the answer is yeah. So I thought that was interesting when you go back and you kind of start looking at it. And so we know then that Judah, because his daughter-in-law played the role of a prostitute, that, and like I said, this part, that part of the story where his wife has just died and he's going up to shear sheep. He just says that he just finished the mourning days and he's going up there. So he stops and has sex with a lady he thinks is a temple prostitute, leaves her a down payment, if you will, to keep these things, his signet ring, cord, and staff, and I'll send you a goat. Well, then he sends his good buddy back, what are good friends for, the Adullamite, and so he sends him back, and he can't find her. Well, she's pregnant, and then, of course, Judah wants to burn her because that was the custom in that area at the time. He wants to burn her, and then she sends those things back and says, well, here's the daddy. And so what does Judah do? Now, this is the other part, and this is kind of where you have to read into it, but yet it makes sense. Whose kids are those? Who do those twins belong to? Those are Judah's, but they're his firstborn. So now then, when you get down to this lineage, you go over to Matthew, it makes more sense because who does it mention? Perez. Well, his firstborn son was dead, so who took his place was Perez, which was the first of the twins that was born in that. So, man, what a story. And I appreciate so much what Kelly Quinn said at the end of class last week. It shows us that God's going to make his plan work with us or without us. So we go through here and we look, and Tamar, is Tamar of that family, kind of? And the answer to that is no. She's more of a Canaanite woman because she was not. So think with me. Is she in that bloodline? And it's like, no, she's taken from outside and becomes... Okay, so there's one woman. Then it comes on down in this lineage in Matthew, and it talks about Solomon who married Rahab. Well, 2 for 2. What was Rahab? Was she of Jewish descent? No. And here again, she literally was, I guess, in this regard, harlot, prostitute, which Tamar had pretended to be, and because of her act at Jericho, she was saved, but her name is mentioned in this lineage because she is the mother of Boaz, who married Ruth, who is mentioned there also, who is she a Jew? No. But she followed Naomi and took care of her. So we have 3 women, none of which are in this Jewish lineup, if we will, where we got to keep everything, in this regard. And then we come on down. Well, Boaz married Ruth. Ruth has Obed. Obed is the grandfather of David. So she is mentioned in here. And then we come down and we know that was David the firstborn of his family? No. See, he's the youngest son. And so we come down here then, and who else is mentioned in Matthew chapter 1? Bathsheba. I'm going to say this just because, okay? Because maybe, if you think in a worldly fashion, we know that, you can say, well, it was the custom for the women to get out on the roof in broad daylight and strip off naked and take a bath. Something about that, I'm still saying just doesn't sound right. When David brought her in, did Bathsheba say, how can you do this against God? No. And we can blame David all the way along and so on, and as we look at this, and yet we're going to have another story right here in a minute that kind of backs up this idea that, well, you think maybe Bathsheba was infatuated as well, just a little bit. This is King David, and we know the story from that then. A child is conceived, but what happens to that child? Dies. Because of this act. But then, and David has Bathsheba's husband. We can say David killed him. Because how else would it have been responsible? So David killed Uriah. And yet God takes Solomon. He's not the oldest child of David either. But he takes Solomon from this relationship between David and Bathsheba. God, what are you thinking? I'm talking like a human being. I'm talking like everybody else would, right? We sometimes don't want to do that. We say, well, you can't. No, I can ask God those questions. It's all right. And he wants me asking him rather than some guy on the street, right? And the understanding of that is, very simply, David's human and I'm human. And he can take us as humans, regardless of how twisted and bent out of shape that we are, and he can mold us into something in his image. So, we got Tamar, Rahab, Ruth, Bathsheba, and then we come down to Joseph. Joseph is the husband of Mary. Okay? But the child was conceived by, what does it say? The Holy Spirit. Now then, here's what we want to look at real quick. When Judah found out that Tamar was pregnant with child, what did he want to do to her? Burn her. When Joseph found out that Mary was pregnant with child, what did he do? And he kept it quiet. He didn't come out and accuse her, which, did he have the right to? Maybe so, but God, we know, then later came in and talked to him. But you see the difference in the attitudes right here of two men with basically the same thing, same type of situation. So when we look at this, you start putting all this together and you understand it is one book, and you start putting all these pieces together that too many times I think that we have, and we're going to start a new class January. I'll be done by here and we'll start there. But I have gotten a lot out of this. And I know you haven't gotten as much as I have, because I think the teacher always gets more out of it than anybody else when you're doing that kind of stuff. But it has helped me to understand the rest of it, because it puts all these pieces together of things that I've heard this story. I've been told what to believe in this story. I've been told what to believe about this. And no, forget that because we don't understand that. Just let's do this. And it's like, that don't work. And so it helps us with this understanding. Now then, if I were to ask you this morning, and I want some feedback. Because we've got Joseph now. We know he's been sold and he's going down to Egypt. Everybody knows this story. What do you get from this story? I mean, if you were going to sum it up and say the moral of this story is, what's the moral of this story when you look at it? What do you get from it? Trust God. Well said. Somebody else. What do you get? I mean, yeah, Craig.
I always chuckle when we say, come to our church, it will make you feel like family. And then we start looking at these biblical families.
It's like, time out, I believe I'll just, yeah, you're right. You're right. Can people understand that, yeah, we are a twisted group, but when we come together here, guess what we are? We're family. And God looks at us as children. Amen. Amen. Because without it, you know, yesterday, I have to mention this because this made me start thinking this morning because I didn't understand the opportunity that I had, but there was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I think there were 7 kids sitting behind us right here. And at the football game, and they had been saying a few things. I'd turn around and say something, and finally this one young man sitting behind me, I really couldn't see him turn around and look at him. So I was trying to guess where they were all from, and they were going to school at Fort Smith down there, Western Arkansas University or whatever it is now. And he said, "Okay," he said, "my generation's messed up." And they all were like, "Yeah, we don't have," and it was like, am I hearing that right? Somebody blow in this ear and see if it comes out over here. He said, and I need help because this guy says, "Well, I want to get married, but I don't want to date." That's what started it. He made that comment. He said, "I want to get married, but I don't want to date." And I turned around and looked at him and I said, did I just hear what I think I did? And he kind of laughed, and he said, but he said, and that was when he said, "But our generation's messed up." He said, he said, what do you look for in a wife? He said, "How long have you been married?" I said, "Well, 36 years. I said, "But I didn't get married till I was 38 because I said I was selfish." I understood that. And he said, "Okay." He said, "What do you look for in a wife?" I said, "Well."
You don't even know to ask the right questions.
Yeah.
Much less look for the right answer.
And I said, "I think that probably you've got to find that person that makes you a better person." And he said, "That's the best advice I've ever been given." And it's like, where's your dad? I'd like to visit with him if you can get hold of him. But talking about family, and I said, I said, "Well, next home game," I said, "I've been sitting here for, 12, 15 years. I said, next home game will be the Saturday after Thanksgiving." I said, "Y'all going to be here?" And they said, "Yeah." I said, "We're going to talk more." So I'm prepping because I got an opportunity. Total stranger, but sometimes that's your best audience because people that know me are not going to listen to me.
What impresses me about the lesson you taught here is God gives us all the answers in the Word. He gives us the bad, the ugly, the truth. It's all in the Word. All we have to do is open the Scripture and read it with an open heart and an open mind. He gives it all to us there.
You're right.
We don't have to guess at it.
Yeah.
And the young man's question, the answer's in the Word. It's not in the text and the online stuff he gets and all the things he's looking for in the world. It's right there in the Scripture. He just
Exactly.
goes and reads the Word.
And that's what he's fixing to hear when I see him Saturday after Thanksgiving. Great.
Even the idea of love, we think of that person makes me better, thus I can love them. But the biblical mandate is, in true love, Jesus taught us that you make that other person better is your goal, your ambition in love. It's not what you necessarily get from them, but you're dedicated. That's your promise.
Exactly. Exactly. And you look at that relationship now. I'm going to use this in the story that we're getting ready to talk about. I've heard people say, well, marriage is a 50-50 thing. As a coach, I can promise you that when I addressed the football team, I never said, all right, I need 9% from each one of you tonight. That don't work. You, I need 100%. You. Everybody's got to give 100%, right? Because think with me, and that's what happens right here at Potiphar in this story. If you'll think about what his situation was, if you're not giving 100%, and you're only giving 50%, guys, she's going to fill that 50% somewhere else. The word is commitment. And you better make sure that you're giving 100%. Will you fall short sometimes? And the answer to that is most definitely yes. Women, what are you giving? Boy, and I'm going to tell you, in the society that we have today, and the two young ladies that were sitting with these guys they were sitting there, they didn't have a whole lot to say. Because I was telling the guys that there's some things that, you need to be doing, but you tell me what the responsibility is. We look at it, and as we teach young women today, tell me what their responsibility is. Are we training our children to be young women? Or are we filling their heads with political correctness? Which is, I'm going to tell you, you talk about a tool that Satan has just, he has done his best to drive that through the, kind of like that wooden stake through the heart of a vampire or something. That's what he's trying to do to the church with this political correctness stuff. Because you can't call sin, sin. You can't call... And it's like, nope. God never backed off of any of it, going back to what Gene said, because you read the story, the truth is there. So we start looking at this. I think that my vision, and I wrote this down, my positive point of view on this is that be faithful to God and He blesses. So we start looking at this, and we jump into chapter 1 right here, and in verse 1, and we find out that Joseph is sold. He goes down there. Potiphar, an Egyptian officer of Pharaoh. He is the captain of the bodyguard. So today's terminology, he's head of the Secret Service. Fair enough? He's head of the Secret Service. Does he spend a lot of time with Pharaoh? Set this up now. Think about what his job is. Because what's his job? Making sure that Pharaoh stays safe. So that means that he's got to be there, have certain people in there, and he's got to make sure that those guys are not conspiring, or that they've got a conspiracy somewhere that somebody else is paying them money to kill the Pharaoh. And he spend a lot of time on the job? Is he spending enough time at home? Keep that thought in mind. So what does he do? He buys Joseph. Now then, the brothers got how much? 20 shekels of silver? Did they sell him for the same amount? Is that the way you do business? Sell somebody for the same price that you bought it for? No, they made money off this kid. He's 17 years old. Look at him. He's going to grow. He's going to fill out, man. He can work. He can do all kinds of, they got a sales pitch, just like a used car salesman. Yeah, you can laugh. Lee. So he's got this, and so they got this sales pitch, and they make the pitch, and Potiphar buys. Okay? So he's working for the guy that headed the Secret Service for Pharaoh right now. But in the next verse, as he bought him and he puts him to work, the Lord was with Joseph, so he became a successful man. Time out. Who wrote this? How in the world can you be a successful man when you're a slave? Right? Isn't that our ideology? Here's a successful man. Now then, let's think about this for just a moment. How long has Joseph been in this household? Man, we don't know right now. But I know that he's growing and beginning to fill out. And so I'm thinking it probably took a couple of years coming and going that Potiphar has noticed, and that it has become, hey, this kid is something. And everything he touches, it, you know, he can go in there and water the plants, and they look great after he does it. Whatever it is, I mean. So Potiphar begins to notice this. And think with me, now as he notices this, do you just dump everything on it, or do you just continue to give him, well, he got that and he handled that pretty good, so what do you do next? You give him a little bit more, right? When you're training people, when you were at Lawrence and different things, you had somebody come in, well, you didn't just dump it all on them to start with. You tried to teach them a little bit, and then when they got to work, then you put a little bit more on them, and you put a little bit more on them, until, wow, guy's really a good person, and the individual's really a good worker because they can handle those things. And you see how that they handle that, and it prospers. And so Joseph prospered in his master house as a slave. Now, his master, and here's the important thing. Do the Egyptians know who God is? Probably, unless God has specific, and we don't have any record of that, they ain't got a clue. Because why? Well, they got all these gods, and they built these temples, and they built them along the Nile, and you got this one, you got the calf, and you got this, and you got that. And I thought it was kind of interesting this week. Makes me think that they talked about the Bible story when the Israelites left Egypt, the way that God took Israel, and the long way around, if you will, because they said that there were fortified forts that Egypt had built along that northern section to protect them from the Middle Easterners coming in there and so on. Well, everybody said, well, that's a bunch of bunk, until the last couple of weeks. And guess what they have found? One of those 84,000 square foot fortresses that was built along that, and now then they kind of have an idea of where they can look to, and they have found others. True story? Yep. Was the Bible always true? Yep. Man just now catching up. We're only 5,000 years behind. Well, actually, closer to just 3 or 4, I guess. 3 to 4 thousand years behind. So all those things are going on. So, but here's Joseph. And Potiphar notices how that whoever his God is, his God blesses him. Does he worship the gods of Egypt? No. He talks to an imaginary God. The kid's a great worker, but I don't know whether he's hearing voices or what, but he's talking to somebody I can't see. This was unusual for them, because they had the idols. They bowed down to that. That's where God was when I was. And this kid's talking to somebody. He didn't have to see anything. And yet his God is there. This is unusual. So Joseph found favor in the sight and became his personal servant. He made him overseer of everything that he owned. He put in his charge. It says the only thing that he didn't touch was the food that Potiphar ate. He didn't chew it for him, Think about that. Everything that you. Now then, let's go back to what the other part of the story was that we started with. If Potiphar has placed Joseph in charge of everything, time out. Is Potiphar spending time at home with his wife? I dare say no. Because why? Because of the job. Well, you know, honey, I got to work. I got to do. And true, dads, no question. Yes, we have to. But if we are not deliberately giving that time to make sure that our spouses and our children are being fed the spiritual things that we need to be giving them as a father, then something bad is going to happen. And so it came about from that time that he made him overseer in his house and over all that he owned, the Lord blessed the Egyptian's house on account of Joseph. Thus the Lord's blessing was upon all that he owned in the house and in the field. Potiphar recognizes, I've been here a long time, been doing this, had other slaves and so on, but when I brought this one slave in, wow, things changed. Look what this kid has accomplished. I don't know. I don't know what pit they drug him out of, but see if there's another one up there somewhere. You know, go back and see if you can find another one like this one. Now Joseph, here we go. Joseph has matured. He has grown up from that 17-year-old kid that was first taken down into Egypt. He was handsome in form and appearance. And it came about that after these events that his master's wife looked at him with desire. Where's Potiphar? Now, let's think about this for just a minute. Should Potiphar have turned over everything in his possession to this kid? Probably not. Because, and ladies, I'm not trying to think for you because there's no man that can think like a woman. But think with me in this regard, because here's my line of thinking. With the exception of the sexual act, who's fulfilling the needs of Potiphar's wife? Who? Think about it. He's got control of everything. Yo, you're going to town today? I'll get your buggy. I'll get this. I'll get that. I'll go with you. I'll take you into town so that you can get the things. Does Joseph understand what's happening? Not a clue. Don't know if he's ever had a girlfriend yet at this time or whatever, but the thing that you admire about him is that he does what? He holds fast to what God, because he's still believing. And he looks. And now, even though he is a slave, do you think that Joseph feels blessed? What were his brothers originally going to do to him? Kill him? Oh, yeah, maybe he feels like, that's not so bad after all when you consider the alternative. Kind of like the guy said, growing old is not such a bad deal when you consider the alternative to it. Die young. So here's Joseph, and he's in this house, and he is doing everything that he can. He's focused. See, here's a young man that is focused, and he's focused on what? He's focused on what God has, and he knows that as long as he's doing what he's supposed to be doing, that God will bless him, because why? He sees it as well. And so then, it came about after these events that his master's wife looked at Joseph with desire. And she said, lie with me. She's trying to seduce him. But he refused and said to his master's wife, now I like what he says. Behold, with me here. My master does not concern himself with anything in the house, and he has put me in all that he owns in my charge. Wait a minute. Well, Joseph, I hate to tell you this, but she already knows that. Because why? Because you've been playing husband to her now for some period of time. Remember what I said? Potiphar's not fulfilling that void, but who is? So who's been playing the husband part here with the exception of the sexual act in this regard? So who is she now attracted to in this regard? Joseph said, there's no one greater in this house than I, and he has withheld nothing from me except you. Now, because you are his wife, how then could I do this great evil against and sin against Potiphar? No, God. She had to shake her head on that, because what would you have been expecting him to say? Potiphar, I can't do that against, well, after what he says, but he says, no, look what Potiphar has done to me, and I can't do that against God. Does she know who Joseph Cascade is? See, she doesn't know this God. Wait a minute, have you got one of those images in your pocket? I mean, what God are you talking about right here? I'm going to say 100% she totally ignores what he says in that statement right there. 100%. God doesn't mean, in this instant, God doesn't mean anything to this lady. So, and as she spoke to Joseph day after day, how long did this go on? You know, thank goodness that there's other people in the house and things like that. Until one day, Joseph is, once again, this is where, this is a good thing about guys, this is a bad thing about guys. Joseph knows that this going on and on and on and on and on, and guys, I know ladies, y'all hate to admit this, but sometimes guys can just totally ignore you. And I think that Joseph had heard this enough that it's like, oh, here we go again. And he ignores her until that one day when Joseph is kind of unconscious, because he should never, what? Be in the house alone with this woman. But has that happened before? Yeah. Does Joseph even think about it? No. And where does he wind up? She grabs him, and she's trying to pull him down, and he comes out of his robe, and he runs. Now then, second point to this, and talking about Potiphar. How come Potiphar doesn't have some kind of a clue about what's going on? Does he? He ain't got a clue. Because why? Because his mind's at work. What's he done? He's turned over that family stuff to who? Joseph. Yeah.
But add to that a culture where that's not unusual, and the best is not expected of one another on parallels of today.
Yeah. Hey, what's the difference? You know. What's the difference? It's kind of like a part of the commentary for in. I shouldn't say anything. Oh, forget that. But you think about that, and it's like it was not uncommon. Today, I mean, we're an adult class, and I get so sick of having to learn about some things out there in a coach's office somewhere by somebody that has absolutely no idea about being godly or anything. Why can't we talk about things like this in church? With brothers and sisters to talk about this, okay? So when you look at these things, and then we've all heard the term sleeping your way to the top, and we know exactly what that means. Tell me that doesn't happen in our society today. Has anything changed over time? No, because human nature has been the same since the beginning when man was corrupted. I heard somebody say that, you know, guys, think about this, makes sense, that what happened in the garden is exactly the reason why women today, when you ask them, where would you like to go and eat? And they say, I don't care, I don't know. They never pick a place because the last time they did, they got kicked out of the garden. So it's no, I had to do that for Sheila. I knew the reaction I would get. It's like, she gonna kick me in the shins when class is over. But we look at this, and it's like you said, and especially in higher society, where Potiphar is the what? Head of the Secret Service. He's got some prestige. So when Potiphar comes in, what does he do? His wife says something, which is what men do, because he's going to listen to his wife, and immediately he doesn't even think about this. It's just what his wife presents to him right then, and what does he do? Boom. Joseph wakes up in prison. Come on in. So that's where we'll shut it down right there. But Potiphar, once again, doesn't have a thought process, but I'm going to ask you this, and think about this for a moment. Does he think about it afterwards? Think about that. All right, next week.